In August 2018, the Daily Mail, a right-wing mass-market newspaper, ran a story with the headline, "Corbyn's Wreath at Terrorists' Grave." What this story very quickly turned into was this claim that Jeremy Corbyn, the left-wing, the socialist leader of the UK Labour Party, had laid a wreath at the grave of those responsible for the Munich Olympics atrocity in 1972 by Black September. This, of course, caused immense amounts of outrage and fed into a narrative which was being developed at the time that Corbyn was a terrorist sympathiser. This phrase, terrorist sympathiser, came into widespread use. It was used by David Cameron, as I recall, and it was used all over the media to suggest that Jeremy Corbyn was not a legitimate political leader at all, but was in fact a friend of terrorists, a terrorist sympathiser, someone who did not share our British values, but who instead was on the side of the people who had committed this appalling atrocity which took place in 1972 at the Munich Olympics, in which Israeli athletes were murdered by the Black September terrorist group. The Daily Mail story is an interesting one in a number of ways, and we'll be looking at it in a bit more detail. But the thing to say straight off, initially, is that at no point does the Daily Mail make this claim at all. It does not make the claim. What it does instead is presents a series of photographs, pictures, which attempt by accumulation to kind of establish that Jeremy Corbyn did in fact lay a wreath at the grave of the Munich terrorists. Now, of course, he absolutely did no such thing. But the story is told in pictures, and so our rebuttal here is going to be, to some degree, pictures. We're going to be talking about pictures quite a lot, because there really aren't any words to talk about here. In 2014, Jeremy Corbyn was at a ceremony to commemorate the victims of the Israeli bombing of the Palestinian Liberation Organization, PLO, headquarters, which is outside Tunis in Tunisia, in 1984 by Israeli forces. This was called Operation Wooden Leg. The atrocity killed 54 people. Many of them were civilians. Many of them had nothing whatsoever to do with any conflict. They were simply people who worked in this compound or in this building. The atrocity was condemned by the United Nations, by Margaret Thatcher, by Ronald Reagan, by just about everybody. It was an appalling act by the Israeli forces. The PLO commemorates this event annually at a cemetery called Hamanchot, which is just outside Tunis in Tunisia. And in 2014, Jeremy Corbyn and some others were there to help them do this, and to be there and to add their voices to this commemorative ceremony. Now, we can dismiss something straight away. The claim that Corbyn laid a wreath for the Munich terrorists is obviously impossible, and we know this. We know where the Munich terrorists are buried. They're buried not in Hamanchot Cemetery in Tunis, where Corbyn was, but in a cemetery near Tripoli, in Libya, which is 750 kilometres away. There's no possibility that Corbyn could have laid a wreath for the Munich terrorists themselves, because they are buried 750 kilometres away. Now, in Hamanchot Cemetery in Tunisia, there is also a memorial to some other people. Their names are Khalaf and Bezezo. And these were two people who were alleged to be the masterminds of the Black September terrorist group. As far as I know, the PLO dispute that they were the masterminds of Black September, but I'm not certain. It's a very murky background, and it goes back and back and back and back and back. But the point being, Khalaf and Bezezo were alleged to have been the masterminds of Black September, and they have a memorial in this cemetery also, where the memorial to the civilian and other casualties of the PLO headquarters bombing are also located. And this is where Jeremy Corbyn was. Now, Jeremy Corbyn was there to lay a wreath for the victims of the PLO headquarters bombing in 1984. But the memorial to the alleged masterminds of the 1972 atrocity against the Israeli athletes at the Munich Olympics was also there in the cemetery. It's in the same place. So he was in the same place as this memorial. That's really all the Daily Mail story could say. It says a number of times, I think, that he was just 15 feet away from this memorial to Khalaf and Besezo. He was holding a wreath. There was a wreath on the memorial. Join the dots. He must have laid a wreath on the memorial. And that's really the entire story. And it's puzzling in a number of ways, because the Daily Mail doesn't actually claim it. They just simply produce some pictures and say, ooh, join the dots. But also, Jeremy Corbyn has denied it. His press team denied it. It never happened. There's no evidence that it happened. And there's no reason to believe that it did happen. It's simply a claim that the Daily Mail didn't make, and which other people then took up and sort of tried to transform into this story about Corbyn laying a wreath for the Munich terrorists. He was a terrorist sympathiser. Now, there are quite a few pictures from this event published by the Daily Mail. And the interesting thing, though, is that whilst there are all these photographs of Corbyn standing with some people, Corbyn holding onto a wreath, and the memorial slab to Khalaf and Besezo, the alleged masterminds of the 72 Munich Olympics atrocity, there is no picture of Jeremy Corbyn laying a wreath on the memorial to those people. It doesn't exist. It's not there. And I think that in itself is really rather significant, because if you consider the propaganda value to the PLO of a British MP laying a wreath for these people, it would be enormous, it'd be immense. Certainly, had it happened, somebody there would have taken a picture of it happening, because they were taking pictures of everything else. And yet no such picture exists. So I think it's a legitimate question to ask, why does this picture not exist? Why is there no picture of Corbyn actually doing the thing that he's accused of doing? Reason being, he didn't do it. I would use this example. Consider the moon landings in 1969, when astronauts walked on the surface of the moon. Let's just think about that for a moment. So let's imagine that we're talking about the story about astronauts landing on the moon in 1969. And let's imagine that we have the following pictures. We have a moon rocket. We have an astronaut. And we have the moon. Does that show that astronauts landed on the surface of the moon? No. No, it doesn't. The astronaut may have been close to the moon. The rocket may have taken the astronaut close to the moon, but it does not show the astronaut on the moon, walking on the moon, and that's what we want to establish. Did somebody walk actually on the moon? That sequence of pictures just doesn't show it. Consider this sequence of pictures. This is Jeremy Corbyn, all right? That's a wreath. And that's a memorial slab. Does that sequence of pictures show Jeremy Corbyn placing a wreath on a memorial slab? Plain the answer is no. No, it does no such thing. Corbyn may have been holding a wreath at some point. He may have been close to the memorial slab. The Daily Mail say just 15 feet away. Well, yes, okay, he's 15 feet away with the wreath. It does not show him putting the wreath onto the memorial slab, and that is the claim that was later made. The Daily Mail didn't make it, but that was the claim that was later made by everybody else, that he had laid this wreath on the memorial slab. No such picture exists. We have other pictures, but not that one. Not the one that would clinch it, that would make the claim visible and undeniable. I can perhaps illustrate this with some props. I have here an astronaut. There he is. And I have here the moon. This object is the moon, all right? Now, the astronaut may be close to the moon. He may be going around the moon. He may be in the vicinity of the moon. He may be as close as 15 feet to the moon. But unless we see that, the astronaut standing on the moon, we have no reason to believe that he did so. One of the photographs the Daily Mail published showed a picture of Corbyn standing with some other people beside this memorial to Calaf and Bezezo, who are alleged to be masterminds of the 1972 Olympics atrocity. When asked about this, Corbyn said that he was present but not involved. Now, this phrase, present but not involved, caused an immense amount of hilarity, as if it was an inherently ridiculous thing to say. Present but not involved. What on earth does that mean? You were there, weren't you? Well, we know he was there. We know he was there. He said he was there. There's no question about whether he was there or not. The question is whether he laid the wreath. And I would use an example again from the Apollo 11 mission. Michael Collins, one of the astronauts on that mission, was in the spaceship, he was in the rocket, and he was an astronaut, and he went to the moon, so he was certainly present. But was he involved in walking on the moon? No, he wasn't. He stayed in the spaceship. He had to stay in the spaceship and orbit the moon, while the other astronauts walked on the moon. He was present, but not involved. Jeremy Corbyn wrote about this event in the Morning Star newspaper, a left-wing newspaper in the UK, shortly after the event. And he spoke about the event, where he was, what he was doing, why he was there. And he also said that he made this comment, wreaths were laid for other people, like, for instance, Calaf and Bezezo, the alleged masterminds of the 1972 Olympics atrocity. Wreaths were laid. Wreaths were laid. Now this was used by the opponents of Jeremy Corbyn, who were basically everybody in the UK or in politics and media, essentially the whole of the UK political and media estate, jumped onto this comment to say, aha, wreaths were laid, therefore you laid the wreath. Somehow or other, not perhaps fully understanding the meaning and nature of the passive voice in English, the passive voice. We have two voices in English. We have the active voice and we have the passive voice. I'll give you an example. If I say, I started a fire, that's active voice. It says, who started the fire? I did. I started that fire. If, on the other hand, I say, fires were started, then that doesn't implicate me in any way at all. I didn't start the fires. Fires were started is passive voice, meaning we don't know who started the fires. We're not being told. We're just being told that fires were started, presumably by somebody, but we don't know who. And this is the point about this comment. Wreaths were laid. It's in passive voice. Corbyn is always extremely cautious about his use of language, very careful, very precise. He would only use the passive voice if he meant it to mean something, which is, it was not me who laid those wreaths for the alleged masterminds of the 1972 Munich Olympics atrocity. Other people did. Other people laid the wreaths, but I didn't. I was there, but I didn't lay the wreaths. And this is the claim that was made, that he had laid those wreaths. Passive voice. So what we have is a situation where a claim that wasn't in fact made by the Daily Mail at all turned into this claim that Corbyn had laid a wreath for the Munich terrorists. They tried to establish it by use of pictures. That didn't work because there is no picture of him doing so. And they tried to establish that he had done so because he had used the passive voice, which they had just simply not understood. They hadn't understood the grammatical meaning of the passive voice in the English language. So, did Jeremy Corbyn lay a wreath for the Munich terrorists? There is no evidence that he did. There is no reason to believe that he did. And he has denied consistently that he did. The claim is false.